and then in the one game against Darren Williams. But once he did, I remember vividly thinking that was awesome. Obviously, that's not going to happen again. And then the order of it, right, where it's like, then rest in peace against Kobe Bryant. He has one of the most epic games of Linsanity. And you thought that was amazing, but that is obviously never going to happen again.
That look on his face when he's describing it. That's not just nostalgia. That's someone who lived through something so surreal, he still can't quite process it happened. Jeremy Lin was literally hours away from being cut. His second 10-day contract was expiring, and the New York Knicks were done with him. Then Darren Williams happened, then Kobe Bryant happened, then Toronto happened, and suddenly the entire sports world stopped to watch an undrafted Harvard graduate do something that shouldn't have been possible.
And you thought that was amazing, but that is obviously never going to happen again. And then he has another great game against Toronto and hits the game winner, that walk-in three-point shot. And you think, like, what is going on? Like, what is this? Is this going to keep happening?
Listen to that progression. Game 1 against Darren Williams. He thinks it's a fluke, obviously not happening again. Then he goes off against Kobe Bryant's Lakers, still thinks it's a one-time thing. Then he hits that walk-off three-pointer against Toronto in their own arena, and the home crowd erupts for the visiting player. At that point, everyone watching started asking the same question. What are we actually witnessing here?
Basketball, because it seemed like more and more eyes were watching. The excitement was there. When we were in visiting arenas, if you watch the clip of Jeremy hit that game winner against Toronto, the arena erupts when he makes it. And it was like
it's an away game.
It's an away game. And it was like everyone was Team Jeremy. Everybody was all in for the Knicks at that point because the story was something that was unexpected. And so
here's what made Linsanity different from every other hot streak in NBA history. It wasn't just about the performance on the court. It was the timing, the location, the backstory, and the cultural moment all colliding at once. February 2012. New York Knicks struggling, Carmelo Anthony injured, Madison Square Garden desperate for something to believe in, and this kid who'd been sleeping on his brother's couch becomes the most talked about athlete on the planet in 72 hours. The NBA had never seen anything like it. Not this fast, not this complete, not this global.
And I and a couple other guys were working with Kenny Atkinson before every practice. And you're thinking, he's pretty good. Everybody's pretty good. You never think a guy can do what Jeremy did.
Kenny Atkinson was working with Lin before practice every single day. The Knicks coaching staff saw him up close, watched him work, knew he had talent. But here's the thing about NBA talent. Everyone in that league is talented. Thousands of players have the physical tools. What nobody could have predicted was what happened when opportunity and preparation met desperation and cultural hunger at the exact same moment in history's biggest media market.
I just think, like, when I look back at my career and especially that season, you have a lot of dreams as a young kid of like what you want to achieve and play in the NBA. And that's a piece of basketball insanity that like you would never dream of it happening.
And that's the part that doesn't get talked about enough. Linsanity wasn't just a basketball story. It was a media phenomenon that happened right when social media was reaching critical mass, but before it became oversaturated. Twitter was exploding. YouTube highlights were going viral overnight. ESPN couldn't talk about anything else. International media descended on New York. Asian American communities saw representation at the highest level of American sports in a way they never had before. The story had everything. Underdog narrative, immigrant family, Ivy League education, racial barrier breaking, clutch performances, happening in New York during the NBA season when basketball fans were paying attention, but before playoff intensity took over.
I don't think any of us could have expected Linsanity.
It was Jeremy Lin truly about to be cut. He was on his last day of his second 10-day contract. And if it weren't for a couple injuries that happened, he was out.
Nobody expected Linsanity. Not the coaches who worked with him daily. Not the teammates who practiced against him. Not the scouts who passed on him multiple times. Not the fans who barely knew his name 2 weeks earlier. And that's precisely why it captivated everyone. Sports fans are conditioned to expect greatness from first-round picks, from hyped prospects, from players who've been anointed since high school. We know their names before they play a professional game. Jeremy Lin was the opposite of all that. He was the player who wasn't supposed to be there, doing things he wasn't supposed to be capable of, in moments that were supposed to be too big for him.
He was on his last day of his second 10-day contract, and if it weren't for a couple injuries that happened, he was out, never going to get a shot. And instead, he matches up with Darren Williams on that fateful day and has the first game of what became Linsanity.
Think about the stakes of that moment. Last day of his second 10-day contract. The Knicks had injuries, sure, but they also had other options. They could have signed a veteran, they could have made a trade, they could have promoted someone from the D-League with more traditional credentials. Instead, out of necessity more than belief, they gave Jeremy Lin one more chance, and he took that chance and turned it into a cultural movement that transcended basketball. That's not just good timing, that's not just talent, that's something else entirely.
Darren Williams. But once he did, I remember vividly thinking, that was awesome. Obviously, that's not going to happen again. And then the order of it, right, where it's like, then rest in peace against Kobe Bryant. He has one of the most epic games of Linsanity.
The Kobe game deserves its own examination. February 10th, 2012, Lakers versus Knicks at Madison Square Garden. Kobe Bryant, future Hall of Famer, one of the greatest players in NBA history, and Jeremy Lin, still on a temporary contract, outplays him. 38 points, 7 assists, 4 rebounds. The Lakers lose. Kobe walks off the court having just witnessed the beginning of something he couldn't stop. That wasn't just a win, that was a statement. That was the moment Linsanity went from feel-good story to legitimate phenomenon. Because you can get hot against average competition. You can have a career night against a struggling team. But when you do it against Kobe Bryant in Madison Square Garden, with the whole world watching, that's when people start believing it might be real.
And then he has another great game against Toronto and hits the game winner. That's walk-in three-point shot. And you think, like, what is going on? Like, what is this? Is this going to keep happening? And it, at the time was just the most fun version of basketball.
And then came Toronto. February 14th, 2012, Valentine's Day. Jeremy Lin hits a walk-off three-pointer in the Air Canada Centre, and the Toronto crowd loses their minds cheering for the opposing team. Watch the footage from that game. The arena erupts. Fans are on their feet celebrating a shot that just beat their own team. That's how powerful the story had become. It transcended team loyalty. People weren't just rooting for the Knicks, they were rooting for the narrative, they were rooting for the impossibility of it all. That's when you knew this was bigger than basketball. When opposing fans are celebrating your success, you've tapped into something deeper than wins and losses.
When he makes it. And it was like...
It's an away game.
It's an away game. And it was like everyone was Team Jeremy. Everybody was all in for the Knicks at that point because the story was something that was unexpected. And so I just think, like, when I look back at my career, and especially that season, you have a lot of dreams as a young kid of like what you want to achieve and play in the...
Here's what gets lost in the highlight reels and the nostalgia. Linsanity only lasted a few weeks. By late February, teams started adjusting their defenses. The Knicks roster got healthy. Jeremy's role changed. He eventually left New York for Houston in free agency, and his career became a journey of a solid NBA player rather than a superstar. Some people use that to diminish what happened. They say it was just a hot streak, just a flash in the pan, just a media creation. But that misses the entire point. Linsanity was never about Jeremy Lin becoming the next great NBA superstar. It was about a moment in time when sports, culture, media, and human aspiration collided to create something that felt magical precisely because it was temporary. It was about possibility. It was about the idea that the system doesn't always identify talent correctly. That conventional wisdom can be wrong. That the person everyone overlooked might be exactly the person who changes everything. Think about what Linsanity meant for different communities. For Asian American kids who'd never seen someone who looked like them dominating at the highest level of American basketball. For undrafted players grinding in the D-League hoping for one chance. For fans who'd grown cynical about manufactured super teams and predictable outcomes. For everyone who'd ever been told they weren't good enough, weren't the right fit, weren't what scouts were looking for. Jeremy Lin's story resonated because it was real. It wasn't manufactured by marketing departments. It wasn't predicted by draft analysts. It wasn't the result of years of hype and expectation. It was organic, unexpected, and impossible to replicate. The NBA has tried to recreate that magic dozens of times since 2012. They've hyped young players, created storylines, pushed narratives. None of it has worked the same way. You can't manufacture Linsanity. You can't plan for it. You can't predict it. It happens when preparation meets opportunity in front of the right audience at the right moment in history. And when it does happen, it reminds everyone why we watch sports in the first place. Not for the expected outcomes, not for the chalk holding, but for those rare moments when someone we didn't see coming does something we didn't think was possible. The business side of basketball has changed dramatically since 2012. Analytics have become more sophisticated. Scouting has become more comprehensive. Teams have entire departments dedicated to finding undervalued talent. The chances of a player like Jeremy Lin slipping through the cracks the way he did are much smaller now. Every college player is tracked. Every G League game is scouted. Every international prospect is evaluated. But here's what analytics can't measure. They can't quantify heart. They can't predict what happens when someone gets their one chance and refuses to waste it. They can't account for the cultural moment, the media environment, the collective hunger for a story that feels authentic. The numbers can tell you Jeremy Lin was a capable point guard. They can't tell you he was about to become a global phenomenon. And that's what makes Linsanity still relevant 12 years later. In an era where everything is measured, predicted, and optimized, it stands as a reminder that sports can still surprise us. That there are still moments that transcend the spreadsheets and the projections. That sometimes the most important stories are the ones nobody saw coming. The WNBA is experiencing something similar right now, with the explosion of interest around players like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. Rookies coming in and immediately changing the conversation around the league, bringing new audiences, creating cultural moments that go beyond just basketball. The league's television ratings for 2024 increased by 48% compared to 2023. Attendance records are being shattered. Merchandise sales are through the roof. And it's happening because of players who captured the public imagination in ways that couldn't be manufactured or predicted. That's the Linsanity effect. Not the specific player or the specific moment, but the reminder that sports are at their best when they give us something unexpected. When they show us that the conventional wisdom isn't always right. When they prove that opportunity plus preparation can create magic, even when nobody's expecting it. So was Linsanity just a hot streak? Sure, if you only look at the statistics. But if you understand what it meant culturally, what it represented symbolically, what it proved about possibility and opportunity, then it was something much more significant. It was a moment when sports reminded us why we care, why we watch, why we believe. And those moments, regardless of how long they last, are what make sports matter beyond just wins and losses. The question isn't whether Jeremy Lin became a Hall of Fame player. The question is whether that 2-week stretch in February 2012 changed how we think about talent, opportunity, and possibility in professional basketball. And the answer to that question is absolutely yes. Every undrafted player who gets a chance, every overlooked prospect who proves the scouts wrong, every unexpected breakout that captures the public imagination, they're all walking in the path that Linsanity created. That's the legacy, not the statistics, not the career trajectory. But the proof that sometimes, just sometimes, the impossible can happen. And when it does, it's worth celebrating, worth remembering, and worth understanding for what it really meant. Because the next time someone comes out of nowhere and does something nobody expected, we'll all recognize it. We'll all remember where we were when we watched it happen. Just like everyone who lived through February 2012 remembers exactly where they were when they watched Linsanity unfold.